the basement from the past. Nora hadn't meant to come back. The paperwork insisted, the solicitor's voice polite and final, and the address insisted more loudly. A childhood stitched into floorboards. The Keene house rose from a lawn half-choked with weeds, its porch slouching like a tired shoulder. It smelled like cedar and old paper, the kind of house that keeps a chronology in its joints. She set the battered shoebox on the front step, breath leaving her as if the house answered in exhalations. Neighbors nodded with the practiced sympathy of people who know too many endings. "Marcus left, didn't he?" someone said, as if a brother could be a footnote. The house kept its own reticence. Doors that closed without wind, the basement door always a degree colder where its paint had chipped away. Nora ran a hand along the latch. The iron felt alive with history. She had come to catalog papers, debts, a life reduced to titles and dates. But the house seemed to demand narrative, not inventory. Inside, rooms looked like photographs left half-developed. Furniture in careful disarray, wallpaper patterns that suggested a vocabulary she'd forgotten. A clock with hands arrested at 2:13. In the back closet, she found the old box, its twine brittle, a child's handwriting looping across the lid as if practiced under a lamp. Opening, it felt like opening a closed chapter. Inside were small, patient things, buttons, a folded note, a token carved from wood, objects that asked for stories rather than giving them. At the bottom of the box lay a cassette, an object stamped with an era's slow intimacy. The tape recorder had to be found before she could listen. She remembered one in the attic, buried under textbooks and a moth-eaten sweater. Fingers hesitant, she clicked it on. Static breathed first, then a voice slipped through like a remembered street. Familiar cadence, a cadence that pulled at something small and private in her ribs. "Nora," it said, and the hair along her arms stood up because the voice sounded like the house itself. The voice on tape recited things she didn't expect. A joke about the kitchen table, a misremembered promise about a summer, a precise description of a dent in the banister. There were pauses between phrases where something like breath occupied the air. It wasn't a narration so much as a careful inventory of intimacy. Nora's throat tightened. These were not facts anyone could glean from tax records. They were private. Whoever had recorded them had been sitting in the room where she'd last laughed without caution. She told herself it was coincidence, a trick of nostalgia. But after the tape, small betrayals accumulated. A jar shifted an inch from where she'd left it. A photograph turned face down on a table. The faint impression of a footprint in the dust near the basement stairs, though the mud outside was dry. The house's timeline seemed to hiccup. Each hiccup answered with a sound she could not place, a tapping like someone counting the steps, or a chair settling into a posture it had held years ago. When she found the photograph of Marcus, he was 12, grinning with a gap-toothed boldness she remembered and did not. On its back, someone had written in a child's hand, "Don't forget me." It wasn't a plea, it read like an instruction. The tape played in the background, persistent and soft. Between the spoken words, the recorder picked up ambient sounds that seemed to belong elsewhere, wind on a porch not hers, the distant slam of a door that did not exist in the house's current layout. Curiosity pushed her toward the basement like an osmotic pressure. The stairs exhaled when she descended, and the single bulb over the landing buzzed with an uneasy rhythm. It was colder than the rest of the house, as if the walls remembered frost. The air tasted of dust and lemon oil. On the concrete wall, someone had scratched a series of dates, and a single name repeated beneath them: Marcus, 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 each inscription older than the last. The marks could have been made by a child, a man, a tool. They were only intent. The tape recorder, inexplicably, began to play faintly downstairs as well, though Nora had left it upstairs on the landing. Sound traveled like a rumor through the house, accents of rooms and years. She stood very still and listened to herself say things she could not remember saying, to answer questions she had not yet been asked. The temporal knot tightened. Recordings of past and present folded into a place that kept them together, like a library in which the books rearranged themselves overnight. Panic and wonder are close cousins. She wanted to leave. Instead, she found she was settling the house again, with the thoroughness of someone cataloging evidence, dates in a notebook, labels on photos, items returned to their boxes. When she sealed a cassette in the shoebox, the action felt ceremonial, like tucking a part of herself into a ledger. The tape inside carried a voice that sounded older and kinder, and informed her of things she had yet to do, as if the house were proffering an outline of her next steps. She thought she heard movement above. The floorboards slept, but shifted. Shadows pooled and unpooled. A door closed somewhere on the third floor, a gentle, satisfied sounding click. The tape, now part of the box's bundle, played a fragment of a laugh she recognized as her own, but not yet made. The house did not shout its secrets, it suggested them, like a neighbor tapping a code on a shared fence. The suggestion became insistence when the basement door at the bottom of the stairs closed once, cleanly, without wind. Nora placed her hand on the cool wood of the door. The house seemed to hold its breath along with her. Names, dates, the carved tokens, the tape's half-sentences, everything composed a net. She could step forward and lift the latch, or step back and walk away, leaving the boxes unpunctured. The voices left to their slow conversation. Memory, she realized, is not always a thing you own. Sometimes it is an address you visit, and that address insists on meeting you halfway. She made a choice that was not heroic. She recorded herself into a cassette player, a careful, ordinary recounting of times and names, of the dent in the banister and the joke from summer. She folded the tape into the shoebox and wrote on the lid in a hand steadier than she'd felt, for when you forget. Then she closed the box and pushed it into the deepest shelf the basement offered. The house seemed to approve, not with sound, but with a tiny rearrangement of air, like a page turning. She left that night with the sense that she had not closed anything so much as added her voice to chorus. The porch light blinked once, as if in farewell. The shoebox rested among others in its new archive. In the car, she rewound the tape she'd recorded, half hoping to hear a clerkly echo of her own voice, and instead caught, under her words, the faint sound of someone humming Marcus's old tune, or the house's imitation of it. She turned the recorder off and set it on the passenger seat. Outside, the Keene house stood patient, its basement door slightly ajar in the dark.